All right, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie. Today on Lunch Break, we're talking with Richelle Gribble to learn about her work and what she's been up to recently. Richelle is a multidisciplinary artist based in Los Angeles, and she explores planetary connectivity. Her work examines networks and systems-based investigations to reflect the way human impact, technology, and the environment interact. She's also the founding director of SUPERCOLLIDER, which is an art, science, and technology exhibition platform, and the co-founder of Beyond Earth, an artist collective that explores frontiers of art and space. She's been a SciArt resident, and her work appeared in our exhibitions Distinguishable From Magic and Weather the Weather. For everyone joining us, we're going to have some time at the end to answer audience questions, so you can send those in throughout this talk using the Q&A function on Zoom. So thank you so much for being with us, Richelle, and I'll let you take it away to tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in, and thanks for the invitation. I love SciArt Initiative, and we've done some collaborative projects with SuperCollider and intersecting our two worlds. So perfect symbol of the Venn diagram, bridging things together. But yeah, I'm Richelle Gribble, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey as an artist, as well as various projects that have emerged during the process. So to start, my core interest and drive really comes from looking at how everything is connected for better or for worse. And this has really led to a very deep investigation of planetary interdependence, which is really being amplified right now with the pandemic, and seeing that no matter how distant we feel on Earth, everything is interconnected and transforming and affecting everything else. So this has led to some collaborations with various space companies and organizations to really look at that overview effect, which is described by Frank White and astronauts when in spaceflight and viewing Earth from above and realizing that interconnection. So this has really inspired me to work with space professionals and experts in their field to learn more about that concept. So this is a little bit more about me, but you just covered it. I am based in Los Angeles, and I've recently been embarking on this project called the Nomadic Artist, which has lasted for about 4.5 years, and it's essentially exploring planetary connectivity through residencies. So my whole mission is to really travel the world for free using artist in residence programs, and in that way, my art becomes my passport. And this has led to various residencies throughout California. I've worked on a laboratory in Iowa and got to explore insect collections and archives of birds and insects. I did a residency at the Biosphere 2 in Arizona, where you actually are able to explore various interconnected biomes, and that informed new art projects. I did residencies in Japan, and I actually had to postpone my next program, which is going to be in the Amazon. So I'm really excited to explore the jungle biome. And so it's really this notion of looking at the interconnectivity of the world, and that includes our technology, that includes our urban systems, and also our natural systems colliding. And my mission is to really reveal to people that everything is linked. And if you start to take certain pieces out, the puzzle becomes unstable. And so it's really showing that these things have to work together for resilience and for stability. So this is just an example of this project on display. So it's fairly large, and I really love doing large projects because you get to do a small activity repeatedly and then kind of step back and kind of get lost in this giant world. And you'll see this commonality of me using these round shapes, because that's also referring to our planet. So I thought I'd give you a glimpse at my recent residency on the tall ship Antigua, which was in the Arctic Circle. And essentially, you're on a boat for 2.5 weeks with artists and scientists, and you go along the perimeter of Svalbard, docking to glaciers. You have polar bear guards that surround you as you make art on the Arctic surface. And it's really just a glimpse into my process. I love being outside, collecting things. I feel like almost like a pseudoscientist, just using my iPhone as my microscope and collecting tons of materials and really just trying to document and absorb my environment, so that way I can kind of channel that experience back to the public in my art. And to me, I feel like before I can paint a glacier, I need to see the glacier. I need to smell it, feel it, hear it. And one of the biggest surprises while in the Arctic is you hear the bubbles popping from the ice melt. And so it creates these incredible soundscapes. And so this is just a glimpse. A lot of these projects are in progress still, and I'm developing a whole new collection based off of this journey. But I made ice molds of polar bears, and then unfortunately along the coastline, a lot of plastics kind of get washed up on the shore and then even frozen into glaciers. And so we weren't able to take anything from the natural environment, but if it was litter, we were able to take it home. So I brought back bags of plastics and buoys and all types of things, and then wanted to recreate these landscape drawings on the shards of plastic to really show that these are replacing these natural environments. And it's our plastic that will last the test of time and is what's left behind and what remains perhaps when humans are gone. So this was recently exhibited at the Spring Break Art Show in Los Angeles. Again, working with my environment to make the art is also a very important process. So collecting ice chunks and then creating cyanotypes, which are actually documenting using the sun, the starlight to emit and create the actual image. So all of these journeys really are the backstory to the final exhibitions. So this was a recent exhibition at Jonathan Ferrer Gallery in New Orleans, and the show itself is entitled Anthropocene, looking at human impact on the environment and how we're really reshaping its story. So common themes for me includes looking at our web of life and the interconnectivity of humanity, as well as like our ecological footprint, what is our trace and what things do we leave behind, but then also celebrating just the incredible biodiversity of our planet and realizing that, you know, the polar bears are affected by what happens, you know, with the dolphins on the coastline. Like our oceans are all linked, our forests are linked, and being able to show that, yeah, we're all part of the pale blue dot is really what my work tries to show. So I was going to highlight just a few projects. This was shown in the video. It's entitled Linked and contains 350 small paintings of ecosystems and technology systems. And it's actually an interactive piece, and they're all backed with Velcro. So my mission is to really encourage people to create their own connections. And you'll see the way that I decided to organize this collection was almost like a mind map, where you begin to create these classifications from space technologies to satellite imagery, and then it evolves to trees, plants, and natural organic life. And to me, I love the process of making art, of course, and that journey that's part of it. But then what gives so much more meaning to the work is where it's shown. So I've been working to really get the artwork out there. And this is actually the project installed at Relativity Space, which is a rocket company based in Los Angeles. And that idea of having rocket designers and engineers being able to remember that technology is born from nature and really help inform their own work and just inspire new insights. That's really something that I love to do and brings me closer to doing more public art projects. This is another project that's similar in the way that it's interactive and requires or includes various different components. So this is a 365 project called Network Life, where every day I created a network, and that could be anything from a crack on the sidewalk to the veins on my wrist to the lines of a fingerprint. And to the side, you'll have these computer games where you can actually move around the tiles and then create your own patterns and visual connections. And it's really exciting to see what starts to emerge. I'll just turn that down a little bit. So it was a complete experiment. This was my first interactive project. And it was amazing because people would discover that a firework looked like a dandelion, or that a river delta looked like the tree structure. And at the time, I was just going through this process of pattern recognition, and then later discovered I was looking at graph theory and network analysis without having known it. And what it really is starting to reveal are the common network structures and patterns that exist in the world. And so this was really an aha moment for me when I realized, oh, this is science in a way. And so it was kind of that eureka moment too, that networks are everywhere from the micro to macro scale, and being able to interact with that really helps you feel part of something larger than yourself. Okay, and so this project has been shown in various public spaces, from the John Wayne Airport to a storefront in Tacoma, Washington. And Carrie, if I'm blabbing on, just give me a signal.
You're great. Keep going.
Okay, good. Now, Overview is again inspired by that sensation of astronauts viewing Earth from above and realizing that our borders and boundaries disappear, and it's sort of unified into this one system. And so this was actually the largest piece I've made to date. And this is also on view at the Relativity headquarters, the rocket company. And it really is about just showing this kind of evolution from the organic world, from the primordial goo, all the way over to socialization with networks and connectivity, our social media, and then starts to evolve up into space and our satellites looking back down at us. So this notion of zooming out to understand our place is very reoccurring in my work. And I was so lucky to be able to do an artist in residence program at Planet Labs, which is an Earth imaging satellite company based in San Francisco. And while I was there, I got to view all of their satellite imagery, which is just art into itself, and I decided to create these very man-made, quirky assemblages, rebuilding those satellite images out of man-made materials, from bolts to rubber bands to plastic structures, from circuit board bits to moss that I found. And it was just a way to kind of humanize these satellite images and also compare the ways that organic, like animals and migrations, self-organize relative to the ways that humans self-organize. And it's interesting that you start to see that sometimes animals have a little bit more order rather than our chaotic ways of organizing as humans. So that was kind of a fun observation. And this just gives you a glimpse. So the bottom row is the actual satellite imagery that I was working from to create these tactile plexi cases that are, yeah, they have a lot of dimension to them. And they were also shown at Planet Labs headquarters. So right after that, I went to Japan for another residency. And here in Japan, I was able to make giant pulp paintings, learning a traditional paper making technique that was completely new to me. And I decided to actually work with Planet Labs to image this area in Japan where I was currently creating the artwork during the time that I was there. So you'll see shifting cloud patterns actually document like the day there was a giant typhoon when I was in Japan and getting drenched. And so it was a way of showing my place in the environment. But another important part of this process was using kozo fiber, which is material collected along the river, and a lot of the water that was also coming from the river, and natural pigments that was grown alongside the mountains and things. So my goal was to paint the land made from the land using these traditional Japanese papermaking processes. So you take the kozo fiber, mix it with different pigments, and if you get up close to the pulp paintings, you'll see how much texture is inside. And this is a glimpse at the making process. So you use these stencils, and yeah, this paper factory is unique in the way they have a giant vacuum table, so you can make some of the largest kozo paper works in the world, which is quite fun and definitely a learning process. And then you put it on this giant board and you roll it out, and that's how it's mounted and flattened. So this was the exhibition in the end. And to the left, you'll see pieces of the land that almost acts like a key or legend to these larger maps. Another example of systems thinking, looking at interconnectivity, nothing is in isolation. And this interest of our web of life, there's this native tradition, it's known as the Hopi prophecy, and it was predicted that there would be an invisible spider web that would encompass the earth. And granted, this derived hundreds of thousands of years ago, or hundreds of years ago. And I find that so amazing that that was a prediction. And for many, we could see that as the World Wide Web, or perhaps our web of life, just these relationships that happen with the organic and natural world. And as I kept learning about the web of life, I realized I had to build my own web. So I started to teach myself how to weave these giant mandala structures out of found materials that really referenced our waste, but also our progress, from aviation cables, electronic parts, and synthetic materials. And just kind of a funny note, but when I was weaving this, I got a giant spider bite on my thumb. And so I sort of felt like Spider-Woman when I was doing it. It's kind of a fun fact. So that's the completed web, which is about 8 feet, or quite large. Now space. Okay, I love space. And there are so many artists that are inspired by space because they love sci-fi or they love exploration. But for me, I really love space because I love how it informs our perspective of Earth. And since I've traveled and really started to try to reflect these different ecosystems, communities, and social systems around the world, I really have a dream of being able to experience that overview effect from space. And that has led to co-creating Beyond Earth, which is the space and art collective exploring the frontiers of art and space, as well as creating my own art projects that have been space-bound. So my first project was in 2015, where I was asked to create a small artwork to launch aboard Blue Origin's New Shepard spaceflight. And it was really considering what is our message that representative of humanity. And to me, it was showing that DNA is the thing that connects all life, but really human collaboration is what brought a ladder to the stars. And so it's fun. You get a certificate of flight, you get to know how long it was up there. And then when I was at the satellite company at Planet Labs, I got to create these continuous line drawings of crowds of people, again, referring to our interconnections. And these were laser etched onto the side panels of Dove satellites. So I made art for 4 Dove that are orbiting Earth right now. And that's them being ejected. And now I'm super excited because I'm working with a collaborative team of scientists and artists, and we are actually crowdsourcing content. So if anyone's interested, send me a message. But it's part of this larger project called the Great Pause Project. And we're really trying to create a record archiving the reflections during the COVID pandemic experience and take that story, and we're actually putting images and written testimonials into DNA and other nanofiche technology and putting it onto a lunar lander that is scheduled to land on the moon by 2022. So that's our next space project. So thank you. I hope that wasn't too long.
Great. Thank you. It's really amazing to see where your art has taken you physically, as well as just the different forms that you've used. You're talking about interconnectivity and how your travels and also examining space have allowed you to really see that. I was wondering, with this pandemic, if your views on that have changed at all, or how you've been informed by what's been going on, or if that's inspired any new perspective or new work for you.
Yeah, I mean, like many artists, once the pandemic hit, we just saw show after show after show close down or be pushed back. And that really does change the ways that you present your work. And I think for artists right now, we are actually being offered an amazing opportunity to do things that we wouldn't usually do with our art practice to appeal to the virtual world. And so, for example, those drawings on plastic that I made in the Arctic, I actually learned to 3D scan them, and they're currently on view in a virtual exhibition called Artificial Ecologies. And it's really, it really opened my eyes in the potential of other ways of showing art and presenting it. So that's been a huge eye-opener during this time. And I didn't show examples of this, but I have been doing a daily drawing project, recording life in quarantine.
Oh, great.
So it's anything from, hoarding cans right at the very beginning when we didn't know if grocery stores were going to be open, to, drawings of these giant protests that are taking over the streets for Black Lives Matter. And I think that this is actually helping me keep track of the days, quite honestly, because our notion of time has been a bit blurred when in lockdown. But yeah, that's been a new project, and it's surprising because the pandemic itself actually really relates to my work and my project, and is an overview system. It's showing that we really do affect each other, and it's actually inspiring this sense of social responsibility that you can't just act on your own accord, but you have to act for everyone else. So that's something that has also emerged from this.
Yeah, definitely. It seems very related to the work you do. Do you feel it's necessary to travel to different places in order to really understand or feel that interconnectivity?
Yes, so this come up a couple times because people are like, well, why do you have to schlep your suitcase and your art supplies all the way to the far reaches of the planet to be able to create art and get that inspiration? And to me, I see it as like the role of artists to kind of channel experiences that others might not have or not be able to witness. And I really find value in telling or retelling that story as authentically as I can.
Mm.
And I found that if if I don't go there, then I'm looking at other source materials like photos from online. And is that truly going to build my understanding of a glacier, for example? And, of course, diving deep into news and reading about it can give you a sense of what it is, but that's also through like a filtered process. And I found that actually interacting with the environment gives me such insights that I would otherwise not notice.
Mm-hmm.
And what really drives me is being able to see what others might miss or show what is overlooked. And that often, comes from either the micro or macro scale. And I think that is also very important for environmental advocacy, to see what other things are not being written about or not being documented, and being able to take that artistic story back to the public and be like, I heard the glaciers. I didn't just see them, I heard them melting, and this is urgent. They are popping and dissolving all around us, and I heard the thunder of a calving glacier, and that couldn't be more real. And so,
Yeah, that's actually the first time I have heard about the popping sound. I never even thought about that.
it's crazy. What would be a good example? Yeah, I mean, it's like when you pour Perrier into a glass and then it lets in the glass and you just hear this. That's what it sounds like.
Wow. Could you talk about how you first got into this in terms of art, but also with the topics that you explore now?
Mm-hmm. It's funny because when I look back at my story, it all led me here. And I guess to preface, which I didn't describe because we didn't need to go back into my like younger years as an artist, I grew up in a small mountain town called Idlewild, which has a population of about 3,000 people. Moved to LA, and my college dorm, USC, was the same size as my town. And so that shift of just being like, oh, now I'm in a building with the same number of people that were in my entire town. So that like was kind of a crazy experience of like, wow, scaling. And then from my college years, and I started to do the Nomadic Artist, which just each of these phases was about expanding my worldview. And it keeps growing bigger and bigger. And now I'm going into space, which is the overview. It's the summation of all the travel. It's the summation of looking at all the cultures and languages and biodiversity of the world. And so, I mean, for me, my ultimate journey, the next step is to actually try to get a space flight and experience the overview, maybe even do an artist in residence program in space.
Wow.
So that way it's the ultimate view. And I think that process from going from a very insular world just keeps getting larger the more I expand. And now working with space professionals, just even seeing Earth from above is still a restricted worldview. And then you can go to the cosmic level and then your mind just explodes. So I'm going to stick to Earth for now. And I'm sure that it can continue to expand outward. But that's kind of how I got there. And I never really considered it as necessarily a science art fusion until I stepped back and I realized that I've always been reflecting the natural world, and to neglect that as an artist is to really, ignore something that's so crucial to the human experience and also so crucial to the biosphere and our natural world. And so that's been an important part of the story to reflect that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as artist residency in space would be pretty amazing.
There's conversation about this. So
I'm sure.
it sounds crazy, but with commercial space flights, they're really trying to get passengers up there. And space professionals like Frank White and others, astronaut Nicole Stott, they're really trying to help amplify what art can do in space, because again, it's about sharing a message to the masses. And if you think about it, art can be a universal language. It transcends borders, and in that way, if you have an artist up there, imagine what people can start to dream up and think about and understand about space, if it's not just a story or a written testimonial about the experience, but a visual or all-encompassing or immersive experience that comes back from it.
Great. Yeah, definitely. Well, we do have a lot of questions coming in from the audience, so Julia will ask some of those.
Hey, Richelle, thank you so much for sharing your work with us. I've always been a big fan of yours since we met, but it's great to see what you've been working on more recently. Okay, we're going to get to some of these questions. Let's see here. In terms of when you design kind of interactive experiences or games, we have an audience member who's interested to know if you collaborate with anyone to kind of design those experiences, or is this something that was more of an intuitive process for you as an artist, thinking about interaction as it relates to like kind of games, but also art, your own artwork?
For me, it was a pretty intuitive process. I kept on talking so much about connectivity, and then it was that whole question of medium meeting message. And I was like, what's a connective medium? And I was like, puzzles. So that's what brought me to that process. But I think there's also something really exciting that happens when you have people come to your studio, because I was making all of these drawings for Network Life, for example. So I just had piles of drawings all around my studio. And then someone just came in and started to place order to them. And that was also a moment when I was like, oh, I actually have to give this back over to people to create their own connections. And I think that too relates so much to the process. It's not just about noticing our connectivity in the world, but actually being a participant and making those connections yourself.
That's great.
But
I love that. Yeah.
Long term, I would love to work more closely with technologists. I did have a collaborator when we built out the computer game. But I have talked to other scientists about potentially creating like trackers, so you could see where people moved the tiles, and that into itself is another network and can provide interesting data in terms of how people organize content.
That would be so cool. I know that there's a lot of, some museums and galleries use technology and their security cameras to understand what artworks attract people the most and how long they spend looking at them. So maybe some sort of adaptation of that technology.
That's cool. Look at that.
Okay, let's see here. Going down the list, how do you physically map out your larger pieces, including the Japanese paper making? Do you design them in a smaller scale first, trace or project, etc.? Clearly, this is a question from an artist who wants to know about process.
Totally. Well, yeah, I will say, like, for some of my larger paintings, you'll see they're super like metamorphic, and they're constantly changing and shifting form. That's complete improv. I am just kind of seeing, like, I'll say I paint a jellyfish, and then I'll look back and I'll be like, okay, what form can that evolve into? And I'll be like, oh, okay, that's kind of like an umbrella. So maybe I'll do a crowd of people holding umbrellas. And then, okay, what does that look like? Maybe it's a neural structure that comes up. So that process is more about the evolution. But I will say for the Pulp Paintings in Japan, since I really wanted to document and honor the place, I used the grid structure to enlarge just a small digital image that was sent over from Planet as they imaged that area, and then created the grid, imposing it, and then enlarged it that way. So yeah.
Great. Another question, also from, do we have any advice on how to initiate collaborations with science groups?
Yes. My advice is ask, ask, ask. I think that we forget to ask for
Persistence.
things. I mean, it's just crazy because anytime I've approached a scientist and I'm like, I have a really weird idea and this might be a hit or miss, but what do you think? And more often than not, there is interest to try something. And I think that really reveals the commonalities between artists and scientists is it is about process. It's about experimentation, trial and error, and testing an idea. And so I've always found that, you know, if you don't ask, it will never happen. And so if you have a dream person you want to work with, just start talking to them. And for me, an example of that was at Planet, there was this image or data visualizer, Robert Simmons, who worked as like the lead data visualizer at NASA. And he actually created the first blue marble image that was the zoom out composite of all of the Earth image data that then became the home screen of our iPhones for the first iPhone. I don't know if you all remember that. And I found out he was working there, and I was working on my own art projects, and I was like, totally scared, but I have to go introduce myself to this person and learn about his life and what he does. And since then, you know, we stay in touch and we're always kind of brainstorming different artistic projects. And he was relieved because he wants more opportunities for artistic expression. And so I think that was just proof that, you know, maybe you're actually providing an opportunity for them and not even realizing that. So it is I think there's ways to make it a very mutual benefit.
That's a really good point. Yeah, it's not only about, you know, asking and coming with your own enthusiasm, but clearly, you know, in your collaborations with scientists or science groups, you've taken the time to get to know them. You've, you know, not just kind of demanded, hey, do this thing with me. You know, you meet them, you try and find a way that, you know, talking with you can work for them in a way that's more than just a unidirectional relationship. I think that's really, really valuable advice. Talking a little bit about your residencies, someone would like to know how you choose your residencies and whether you seek residencies that will specifically teach you new skills or, you know, something like that.
That's a great question. And it's been a learning process since I was right at the gates of college and applied to my first residency and got rejected and was like, okay, this is going to be hard. And so, I mean, my first advice with residencies is cast a wide net, send out a lot of applications because there are so many out there. And, you know, if you snag 5 or 8 each year, then you could travel the whole year. Like, it's really about just putting it out there and seeing what you can get. But I've also noticed as soon as you start to have some residencies under your belt, it's easy to get residencies. I think it's just because your process starts to work in that type of environment. And so now I'm able to be a little bit more specific with which residencies I go after. And so my selection process now is either do I get to experiment with a new material or process that will expand my work, like Japan, learning that new washi paper technique was incredible. Do I get to see and experience a new biome that I haven't explored in my art? So that's where I wanted to go to the Amazon jungle because I haven't really experienced the jungle biome. And then do I get to work actively with artists and scientists? There's actually quite a few residencies that offer that type of collaboration. And that to me has been really eye-opening because you're already matching with scientists that are willing to play with artists. So that's always very exciting. And then I guess the fourth consideration for why do a residency is the studio. Like, say you get a really big studio, you can make something really big. Or if the studio is on a boat, you could be challenged to make art on a boat and showcase things in a totally different way.
Or
so
in a space capsule, for that matter. So
exactly.
On the ISS.
Yeah. Exactly.
If anyone does it, I believe it will be you. There's a related question. In your experience as both an organizer and resident, what do you think programs and residencies most need to do in order to facilitate a horizontal relationship between art and science when there are artists and scientists involved trying to work together?
Oh, that's an awesome question. Well, I'm actually learning a lot right now about that process because SuperCollider is actually developing SuperCollider, which is an art sci-tech gallery space that I run and operate here in Los Angeles. We are in the process of developing 2 new science art virtual residencies. And I think having been a virtual artist in SciArt Initiative's residency program in 2015, in the first cohort,
Yeah,
I forget
so.
what year that was.
Me too.
But that really blew my mind and showed me that you can actually co-create art without even being with each other face to face. And that's going to be really important right now. But with these 2 residencies, one is with an algae farm called Spira, and they're providing a blue pigment, which actually is kind of like this color, to art to be able to paint and experiment with it. And then for them, it's beneficial because they get to really test and explore material science and how it can be manipulated and tested. So I think, you know, that is an example of creating that horizontal line, that horizontal benefit. The artists get access to incredible materials that are impossible to find elsewhere. And then the scientists get to really understand and test the capability of their own product. So that was an interesting discovery. And then our second residency in the works is with a space organization, and they're going to pair a space expert with an artist and mutually create some projects together. And the idea there is to really bridge that gap. And so many people in the space world really want to be engaging with others outside of their discipline to democratize space and decolonize it and get more people who are not just in their circles to novel and explore these topics. So again, with that residency, we're both gaining something from it. I mean, for SuperCollider artists, they get to talk to an astrophysicist or someone who's working with extraterrestrial messages to space. Whereas Space for Humanity, the space organization gets to benefit because they have artists, creators creating these expressions inspired by the cosmos. And so I think that was a very long-winded way of answering that question, but just seeing how do both parties benefit. And I think as soon as you identify that, then it's almost like the collaboration has to happen. There's no way around it. Yeah.
It's so exciting to hear about those 2 new programs. I can't wait to see what happens.
Yeah. More info coming soon.
One more question. You have many lovely comments in our Q&A, by the way. Lots of fans out there. But there's a question from someone who is just starting out in this world of science and art, wondering what the best way to connect with people in this world. I guess I'm not sure where this audience member is located, but maybe you have some general advice about that.
SciArt Initiative.
or SuperCollider Gallery.
Yeah. I mean, come to both Julia and I. I mean, I think where we've spent the many years just diving deeper into science art has been finding these resources and trying to compile science art residencies, compile venues that celebrate and promote this work. And a byproduct of that is the community. And I think that what I found so interesting is there were all these little pockets of science art communities around the world. And I think we're at a unique time now where they're all starting to talk and collaborate. And so there's so much potential for this community to be all part of the same conversation. It doesn't have to be so splintered. And we can really work together to make science art an instrumental part of the art world. which is really, catching on, and, also has a history of many people that have been leading the science art movement for many years. But yeah, I mean, I think that finding these types of organizations that really want to help build the community is a good place to start. And from what I've found is the science art community is extremely collaborative, and really is quite generous with sharing resources and information, because it's about helping the planet. It's about building social and environmental responsibility and advocacy. And so if we don't work together, then we're not actually making a difference in the world. And that really is where that generosity and connection comes from, between these organizations. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll just piggyback on that for a second. One of the things I love to do is connect people with other people. As the director of SciArt, I spend a lot of time doing that sort of thing, because as Richelle was saying, this is a collaborative world. It's artists and scientists and everyone between, people who have labels or don't have labels. It doesn't really matter. So if you're out there tuning in and you feel like you're alone in your geographical location, shoot me an email, and maybe I know someone there, or maybe Richelle will, or maybe someone I know will know someone there. So anyways, you can reach me at info@sciartinitiative.org. I'm happy to dig through my files and dig through, these brain files, and see if there are any connections that can be made, because people are doing this kind of work everywhere. And every day people come out of the woodwork saying, I've been doing this for 30 years and, I didn't know anyone else was. And then there are people who say, I'm just starting out. How do I do this? So my advice to you is, shoot me an email, but also go to events. Go up to people, shake their hand, say, hi, my name is blank, and start a conversation. Start building the community around yourself if it's not there already. And you'll have people who are interested, because it's everywhere. Well, thank you so much for sharing your work, Richelle. Everyone, please follow Richelle on media and on her mailing list. Her gallery is up to really, really exciting, amazing things. You can find them online as well. And that's all the time we have for questions today. So I'll let Carrie wrap us up.
Great, thank you. It's been so fun and interesting to talk with you, Richelle. So thanks for being with us, and for everyone who listened and asked questions. This is a great space to be making more connections. So I'm really happy to see that happening. And as Emily Garfield reminded us, there's a virtual mixer next week with SciArt, I believe. So check that out on our social media. And if you want to keep up to date on what we're doing, you can join our mailing list at sciartinitiative.org. And if you'd like to look back at this talk or share it with anyone, we will be uploading it to YouTube and sharing that soon. All right, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks all. This was awesome. And yes, yay, SciArt.